All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of aMillionortheMoon. I want to start a new series called The Most Important Thing. Where in this series, I want to share the most important, valuable lessons, wisdom, and alpha I've learned from years of being in cryptocurrency. Tools of success that I believe will lead me and hopefully many others to seek financial freedom, to truly grasp the concepts that I want to talk about in this series. And to start things off, I want to talk about one of the most important things I have come to understand in this market is number one, understanding the market cycle. This is one of the most important things you can understand if you want to be successful in cryptocurrency. Folks, look, the whole point of this channel, the thing that drives me is trying to seek financial freedom. I want to go from being very much not so rich to being very so rich through cryptocurrency. And in doing so, I want to share the lessons I learned along the way. So folks, if you want to find out more, do me and you a favor, like and subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified of new uploads because we'll be breaking down critical news, technical analysis, and potential investment opportunities throughout this crypto market. So stay tuned. All right, folks. So I want to be completely honest with you with what's driving me to make this particular series. One of my favorite investment books of all time is The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks. And what Howard Marks, who was a very, very famous, successful investor, found that when he was constantly talking to his investors and partners, he would constantly find himself saying, the most important thing is this, the most important thing is A, B, C, D. And so he eventually wrote a book full of the most important things. And so I want to kind of try and do a similar thing, although in a video series. And so to start things off, I think one of the most important things one can understand being in cryptocurrency is the nature of market cycles. Cryptocurrency uniquely has been extremely cyclical on a macro scale. And look, I gotta be honest with another thing that prompted this video. I find that with a lot of retail investors and traders and people just getting into crypto for the first time, they seem to think that the nature of this market is completely random, that there's no rhyme or reason. Things just pump sometimes, hopefully you catch the right narrative, but there's no kind of real way to grasp whether or not you're in a bull or bear market. But I completely disagree. People think cryptocurrency is extremely risky because it's volatile, and that's true. It is extremely risky because of the extreme high volatility and because, projects, rug pull all the time. But I would argue that in a sense, cryptocurrency is one of the least risky markets in the world once you come to understand this one very important realization that once I understood gave me so much confidence in understanding the nature of this market and having all my finances 100% fully in cryptocurrency. 100% of my net worth, 99.9% of my net worth is in cryptocurrency after I became confident of this understanding, and that is the market cycle. Cryptocurrency moves in cycles. So I've been saying, we move in cycles. What do I mean by that? And why is that so important to understand if you want to be successful in crypto? So folks, the most important thing is understanding Bitcoin and Bitcoin's halving schedule. It is the number one driving force that pushes and moves these crypto markets, at the very least historically speaking. And while there's arguments that may go on to change, the influence that Bitcoin has on the whole of the crypto markets may go on to change, that's likely to be a gradual change over a long period of time. And I do believe that continuing to understand the nature of Bitcoin and its halvings, how that affects the entirety of the crypto markets, is one of the most important things you can understand. So for those of you who don't know, roughly every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin being produced gets cut in half on a very repeatable, very well-known basis. And if we take a look at our chart here, this circle, these little white circles, represent every single Bitcoin halving in the past. And so what have we seen when the amount of Bitcoin being introduced to the market gets cut in half? Well, what we've seen is the effect of supply shock, where if you have a product or service that is in demand, in increasing demand for its unique fundamentals or for whatever reason, and then you cut the supply of that product or service in half, well, the price of that is likely to increase due to supply and demand. Well, we've seen that play out to an extreme extent in crypto, where every Bitcoin halving, the amount of new Bitcoin being introduced into the market gets cut in half. And what that has led to is a massive supply shock and a massive parabolic rally. This has happened 3 times now in Bitcoin's history, where we have a halving, and then roughly a year later, year and a half later, we have a parabolic blow off top, followed by roughly a year of bear market where price goes down for, again, roughly a year historically speaking. And then as we approach the next Bitcoin halving, price starts to pick up and up and up again. And folks, this speaks to not just how price action has shown itself to be cyclical, but also human psychology is also extremely cyclical, extremely predictable. This has been known for hundreds of years that in all kinds of trading markets, there are periods of euphoria and periods of extreme depression. And so as you come to understand that things on a macro scale repeat themselves and exist in extremes, from an overbought euphoric extreme to an oversold depressive extreme, well, what you start to realize is that these markets are not in fact random, and that in fact there is a way to cut through the volatility and cut through the randomness and reach a greater understanding of how these markets fundamentally move. Folks, I cannot understate how important it is to realize that cryptocurrency moves in macro cycles. Because while right now, at the time of recording, price is down quite a lot of people are panicking, a lot of people are leaving the market. For those who understand the nature of how these markets truly move, well, you understand that these bear markets have only lasted roughly a year, sometimes a little bit over a year. So there's only actually a couple months left of true pain before we get close to the next Bitcoin halving. Anticipation starts to grow back in the market. And then after the next Bitcoin halving, we feel the supply shock, less supply on the market, growing demand. So if you have less supply and more demand, well, price typically tends to increase. And because Bitcoin is the #1 largest cryptocurrency in the world, it affects all other cryptocurrencies. It affects Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, Hex, PulseChain, everything. It's all interconnected. So like I mentioned, folks, you can look at the nature of cycles both on price action. You can kind of analyze and understand how also human emotions play into this market, how human emotions are ultimately cyclical and exist in extremes in any kind of trading market. But you can also look at indicators. One of my favorite indicators is the relative strength index. This is a lagging indicator that kind of measures momentum in the market. And if we look at how Bitcoin has behaved in the past, we always go from periods of extreme euphoria and being overbought to periods of extreme depression and being oversold. And we constantly oscillate from overbought to overbought to oversold. And where are we going to go in the future? Perhaps overbought to then oversold, to then overbought, to then oversold. So if you calm down and zoom out and analyze these markets, you start to realize that cryptocurrency is not actually extremely unpredictable. It's not actually extremely random. On a macro scale, it's actually extremely predictable. We see how we oscillate from extreme overbought territories to extreme oversold territories with some degree of predictability. In fact, looking at the weekly RSI, we can in fact see that every time we've entered the oversold region on the weekly RSI, that has marked a macro cycle bottom for Bitcoin. So folks, look, while there are global factors that influence Bitcoin, the state of the global economy, depression, recession, global conflict, supply chains, well, that all 100% affects Bitcoin. I would wager that if next time Bitcoin enters these oversold territory on the weekly RSI, it's probably going to be close to a cycle bottom. Why? Because the nature of these markets are actually fundamentally understandable on a macro scale. Sure, short term, things can be extremely hard to call. But over the long term, it's very obvious that the driving factors behind cryptocurrency exist in this overbought to oversold extreme range that is repeatable and predictable due to the Bitcoin halvings. Now, while people go on to argue that the extent of Bitcoin halvings and the effect that Bitcoin and the influence that Bitcoin will have on the rest of the market will diminish over time, and while that may end up being the case, I would continue to argue that for the time being, understanding Bitcoin, understanding the market cycle can be extremely important to help perhaps myself and many others better understand the market, better time the market in an effort to seek financial freedom. Because the time to be buying cryptocurrency is not when your grandma and your uncle are telling you about Dogecoin, but when in fact everyone has left, no one's paying attention, and we're in a period of extreme anger and depression. And knowing when that happens is not random, folks. Again, 1 year after the latest all-time high is typically the bottom of the bear market. Being oversold on the daily RSI is typically near the bottom of the bear market. So the next time that happens with Bitcoin and the rest of the market, that's probably going to be pretty close to a cycle bottom and exactly where you want to be investing in the space and holding until the next Bitcoin halving and the next cycle top, which is likely to be third, fourth quarter 2025 in my most educated guesstimate. So folks, to summarize here, the most important thing is understanding the market cycle. And in cryptocurrency, the driving force to what influences everything has been Bitcoin and the Bitcoin halvings. Because Bitcoin, on a very predictable time frame, every 4 years, roughly speaking, the amount of incoming supply gets cut in half, which leads to a supply shock, which leads to a parabolic euphoric period that's ultimately unsustainable, where we go to one extreme, and whenever we go to one extreme, we have to visit the opposite extreme, from overbought to oversold, and then come in the next Bitcoin halving, we repeat the process over and over again. And it's extremely important to understand this if you are in the altcoin market, because whether we like it or not, Bitcoin is the largest cryptocurrency in the world with the most amount of notoriety and the most amount of historical investors. Therefore, it affects market sentiment. It affects the psychology of the market. It affects the amount of new participants entering this market and the amount of buy pressure they have. Bitcoin affects the altcoin markets. That's why if you're interested in altcoins, you need to be interested in how Bitcoin moves. And while some may argue that the influence Bitcoin has on the rest of the crypto market may diminish over time, and while that may end up being the case, I would 100% still make the case that Bitcoin is still the largest driving force behind this market. Therefore, understanding its macro moves and the cycle helps cut through the apparent randomness of the nature of these markets and actually gives you a better, more fundamental, more predictable understanding of how things typically have moved on a macro time frame. Folks, if you like that video, make sure you like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to be notified of new uploads. This will be a series. I will be sharing more alpha, more wisdom in this series, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to be notified of new uploads. Join our Patreon. Link for that is down in the description below if you want to support us. You'll get access to our VIP Discord group where I talk about the things I'm buying and selling, the kind of things I'm interested in. None of it's financial advice, but it is what I'm up to. Links for everything down in the description below. Also, follow our socials, Twitter, link for all that down in the description below. Folks, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope I provided some value. Looking forward to attempting to provide more value in the future. Until next time, take care.